Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta's Justice Minister Casey Medew is in hot water over a phone call he made, and he's been relieved of his duties by Premier Jason Kenney. Political reporter Brian Lilly joins us to talk about ivermectin and how Ottawa has been studying its effectiveness against COVID-19. And the Lethbridge Hurricanes talk about some of the recent big trades they've made and the potential impact on their club.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Justice Minister Casey Medew has been relieved of his duties over a call he made to Edmonton's Police Chief Dale McPhee about a $300 distracted driving ticket. Premier Jason Kenney says he's asked Medew to step aside while an independent investigator examines the facts of the case to determine whether Medew interfered in the administration of justice. In a statement, Casey Medew had this to say: "To be clear, at no point did I request that the ticket be rescinded. I would never do that. However, in that particular call, I regret raising the issue at all with Chief McPhee. I paid the ticket fully and promptly." Medew says he phoned the chief after he received the ticket, but only to seek assurances that he was not being racially profiled or singled out for surveillance given his political position. Energy Minister Sonia Savage will assume Medew's duties in the meantime. The NDP Justice critic spoke to the media on Tuesday about the Medew incident. MLA Irfan Sabir says Casey Medew needs to resign.
Casey Medew must resign. He cannot be on leave of absence or a paid vacation. He cannot sit in cabinet without portfolio. And stepping back is not the same as stepping down. He must resign. Let's remember the facts of this matter. The Attorney General received a ticket for distracted driving in a school zone last March. He chose to engage with senior law enforcement, the Chief of Police, regarding the penalty levied against him. He called him directly. Medew used his position as Attorney General to initiate this conversation with the Chief of Police. And regardless of whether he asked the Chief to cancel the ticket or not, it is political interference to make that call.
Alberta Health Minister Jason Copping says on social media he tested positive for COVID-19 on a rapid test after displaying mild symptoms last week. He says he's isolating at home. Provincial hospitalizations have exceeded 1,000 patients for the first time since September as the Omicron variant continues to spread. Provincial figures show that there are currently 94 patients in intensive care receiving treatment. Fortunately, close to 377,000 Albertans have also recovered from COVID-19. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says we may potentially be seeing the peak of the Omicron variant, which will impact ICU beds in hospitals.
Certainly it's possible that we could be seeing a plateau or kind of reaching that peak within the next several weeks. It's always true with every wave that hospitalizations continue to rise after the peak of cases. And we have not seen that peak of acute care impact. And again, there's no definitive proof that we are currently at the peak. So we do need to continue to watch. And it's also important to remember that half of the cases that happen in a wave happen on the second side of the peak, which means that everything that we do to minimize transmission, whether it's before the peak or immediately after, still matters. And it matters until that transmission has dropped to very low levels. So our actions are important, again, whether or not we reach the peak in the next week or so.
There are a number of Canadians who strongly believe in ivermectin to treat those with COVID-19. Political reporter Brian Lilly says a number of studies have been done on the drug by the federal government as to its effectiveness. Mr. Lilly says those studies can be found online.
People are putting forward different studies saying ivermectin works, ivermectin doesn't. I can tell you that the federal government has funded studies alongside the American government, alongside provincial governments, into ivermectin, into hydroxychloroquine, I can never say that properly, into so many of the drugs that people online say, this is the cure. And they have been found wanting, or maybe they have limited application, but it is not the cure-all. It is not the be-all and end-all. So there's a lot of different information. The idea that the federal government or Health Canada hasn't studied this, though, it's simply false. You can find the exact studies that they did and follow those links through to what the studies found on the federal government's website.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss the new Pfizer pill being launched and the convoy of truckers heading to Ottawa protesting the federal government's vaccine mandate. He'll have all the details coming up after business news. The Chinese government is claiming that the Omicron variant was introduced to a Beijing resident through mail from Canada. The World Health Organization and Canada Post say the risk of contracting the coronavirus from a piece of mail is extremely low. Federal officials responded to the outrageous claim by China.
I heard that story and found it quite comical. Obviously, we're very concerned with variants within the pandemic, variants that have come from outside of Canada, but that we have to deal with here. Stories like this remind us that from the beginning of the pandemic, some of the news and reporting out of China could not be trusted.
To be very honest with you, I don't know where that is coming from, and we'll check with officials and our partners around the world. I think this is something but not only new, but intriguing, and certainly not in accordance with what we have done both internationally and domestically. I'm no expert and would need to ask both for more information and more expertise on what is being claimed.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he opposes Quebec's anti-vax tax. Singh says the concept threatens to erode the principle that healthcare should be universally accessible.
We all contribute and pay taxes so that we can all have access to healthcare when we need it. This particular measure seems to be eroding the universality, and that to me, as a New Democrat who believes firmly in a system that's there for everyone when they need it, is something that I am concerned about. I want to protect universality, but I also want to look at ways that we can encourage people to get vaccinated. And so I'll continue to push for people to get vaccinated and look at other tools to encourage that decision.
Well, many of us here in southwestern Alberta woke up to a winter wonderland on Tuesday. Lots of snow and much cooler temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a quick peek at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the colder temperatures may not be sticking around very long.
Well, you know how we are in the minuses now, but we are going to be heading towards more pluses towards the latter part of the week and even into the plus double digits by the weekend. Before we get to that, though, we're going to be seeing a few flurries early this evening that should be clearing up later on this evening. Into tomorrow morning, we're going to be seeing a risk of frostbite and some high wind chill factors, high of -10 for Wednesday. As for the rest of the week, though, I will have those details coming up later on in the newscast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. An 80-year-old woman from Lethbridge has died following a single vehicle accident early Tuesday morning between Lethbridge and Coaldale. RCMP say the crash occurred around 6 a.m. on Township Road 92 between Range Road 205 and Range Road 210. The female driver of the vehicle, who was the lone occupant, died at the scene. The police are not releasing her name. Weather is believed to have been a factor in the crash as the roads were quite icy. RCMP are asking drivers to avoid the area while they investigate the crash. Drivers are also being reminded to plan ahead before heading out as the recent snowfall made for some slick conditions on our roadways. The AMA says so far in our area, they've been seeing calls for tows and boosts at 49% above regular call volumes. Manager of Driver Education, Ryan Lamont, says if the temperature continues to drop, they expect to see more calls for drivers with battery issues looking for a boost.
Battery calls tend to go up about 25%. Over and above what we typically expect, just because of the nature of it getting cold and the effect that it can have on the battery. So if you're out there and your battery is 3 to 5 years old, that's the typical lifespan of a battery. So just be aware, plug your vehicle in, as those temperatures are going to be a little bit colder tonight and into tomorrow too.
Lamont says the average wait time for a tow in Lethbridge is around 2 hours. Mental health has been on the top of many people's minds during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cases of depression and anxiety have gone through the roof. A new review by a University of Lethbridge professor has shown that online therapy can be even more important than in person. The review helps people gain access to support that is needed for those struggling with mental health issues. Dr. Cheryl Curry, an associate professor at the U of L, says that this review looked through over 4,000 articles. They found 21 studies that said 8 to 12 hours of online therapy sessions for adults can help with anxiety and depression.
People are isolated in their home and everything's so uncertain, and there's such a stigma when people are struggling with their physical health. They'll go to the doctor, but when people are struggling with their mental health, there's this stigma attached. And so people are hesitant to reach out for help. And so online can really be a great way to seek help where people perhaps feel a bit more safe. Maybe you're in group therapy, but in an online environment, perhaps it can be a first step for people.
The review was published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research on January the 11th. The City of Lethbridge is seeking public feedback on the ways in which Blackfoot and other Indigenous people are reflected in public spaces, including the naming of roads, parks, facilities, and other areas under city jurisdiction. City Council requested an audit of public space names in the summer of last year, following the announcements and discoveries of unmarked mass graves at the sites of former residential Indian schools.
We have hired, working directly with the Blackfoot Confederacy Nations through elders and consultants and youth, to understand their perspectives on existing named places throughout the community, and are also working to do broader public engagement to understand the perspectives of residents and visitors to Lethbridge on how they, understand the impact and level of inclusion of existing named places throughout the city.
You're invited to give your feedback by completing a survey at getinvolvedlethbridge.ca. It is open until February the 28th, and the findings will be combined with the feedback that has been sought directly from Indigenous community members. The Lethbridge Hurricanes have made 2 new acquisitions to their team. With these new changes, there have been 8 trades for the club since November of last year. As Micah Quinn explains now, staff for the organization say these new moves are vital for the team as they push forward into a playoff position.
The Lethbridge Hurricanes have received forward Braden Edwards, along with a second-round draft pick in 2025 and a fourth-round pick in 2023 from the Winnipeg Ice. In exchange, the Ice get forward Chase Wheatcroft and a fifth-round pick in 2022. The Hurricanes also traded forward Logan Barlagi and a fourth-round pick in 2022 to the Medicine Hat Tigers. In exchange, the Canes received forward Corson Hopwo.
Hopwo is a veteran in this league. It's kind of weird in a sense to make a deal with the Medicine Hat Tigers and have a Tiger come into our lineup, but he's a Hurricane now, and that's what it is, and he's a good player, and we like what he brings, and we're excited about what he can bring to our lineup.
Hopwo played 25 games with the Medicine Hat Tigers in the 2021-2022 season, notching 8 goals and tallying 8 assists. He says he's excited to start a new chapter with the Hurricanes.
I'm super excited to kind of strive and help the team get a playoff spot here, so I think it's an exciting time, and I think we're going to do well.
The Canes are currently 10th in the WHL Eastern Conference with 14 wins, 14 losses, and 2 overtime losses. The club will battle the Red Deer Rebels on Friday night at 7 p.m. at the NMAX Center. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Some students in Manitoba walked out of class on Monday to protest the return to school as COVID-19 numbers rise in some regions. A handful of high school students at Collège Louis Riel took part in the demonstration.
The return to school when there's another Omicron wave, another COVID wave, and this time with Omicron, it's really concerning to be so close to people with so many people in that school when people are dying in the hospital, when the hospital is full, and the government hasn't done anything to really prepare teachers and educators to be prepared for this return to school to be safe. I would like to see an option for people to be allowed to go to home if they prefer that, if they feel safer at home. I know some people, their mental health is really affected by going online, and I understand that. But for me, safety comes first.
The White House's press secretary says tensions between the United States and Russia continue to rise. In fact, she says we're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack on Ukraine.
This morning, Secretary Blinken spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. They agreed to meet in Geneva, as you noted. At that meeting, Secretary Blinken will urge Russia to take immediate steps to de-escalate. He will also fly to Kyiv to consult with President Zelensky and Ukraine's leaders, and to Germany for consultations. As you also know, there is a congressional delegation that is also on their way there, and it's a note. I would note that just indicates that support for Ukraine has always been a bipartisan issue, and we welcome that. But where things stand right now. President Putin has created this crisis by amassing 100,000 Russian troops along Ukraine's borders. This includes moving Russian forces into Belarus recently for joint exercises and conducting additional exercises on Ukraine's eastern border. So let's be clear. Our view is this is an extremely dangerous situation. We're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine.
A homeowner in Kentucky is praising God for sending 57 Samaritan's Purse volunteers to help clean up his property after a tornado completely destroyed his house. This is Ray Turner's story.
I never thought that there was a group like this out there that is just here because they want to be here, not because they have to be here. They're volunteers. The tornado was total devastation to my home. Took everything we owned. The house was leveled. I mean, everything. It was total devastation. Wow. Yesterday, I met Samaritan's Purse for the first time. Without them, we wouldn't be where we're at now. I had no idea how many people were gonna be here or what kind of help we were gonna get. Got here this morning. They told us there was 57 volunteers from Samaritan's Purse. It's very hard to put into words what it means to me personally. A gift from God to see all this orange keep me in high spirits, and everybody's happy and everybody's smiling. There is no doubt that God put these people in my life. Thank you all. I thank every single one of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and God bless.
Incredible work in Jesus' name. That's so wonderful to see. Well, it was tough getting around parts of our city today with all of the snow. Fortunately, a warming trend is on the way with milder temperatures arriving soon. Complete weather details are on deck. The plows were out in full force in Lethbridge County today. We had quite a bit of snow. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, a chance of more snow, then we may see a bit of a meltdown later this week?
That's right. Yeah, Hal, we could actually see a 30% chance of flurries early this evening. That should be clearing up later on tonight, though, giving us some sunny skies by Wednesday. Keep in mind, though, the wind chill factors are going to feel quite cold by the morning. High of -10 tomorrow, much colder with the wind chill, risk of frostbite as well. So that's something to be aware of. We're going to see a drastic swing in temperature also between Wednesday and Thursday as we see that -10 climb all the way up to 7 degrees on Thursday, mix of sun and cloud, back down to 0 for Friday, and then up again on Saturday to 6 degrees. 14 that's where we could see that double-digit temperature on Sunday there, 14 degrees, and then a high of 4 for Monday. So we're a little bit all over the place, kind of like a roller coaster, but the average high for this time of year, -2, average low for this time of year, -14. So we're not doing too badly when we're looking at keeping within that range. 12 degrees, that was our high temperature on this day back in 1986. And in 1950, we were down at -40 degrees. 8:20 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, 5:03 p.m., giving us 8 hours and 43 minutes of daylight, 2 minutes longer than we had yesterday. Over on the west coast tomorrow, Victoria looking at a 30% chance of drizzle and rain, high of 7 degrees, 8 degrees in Vancouver with a 60% chance of rain or drizzle. Also some fog patches in that area. -14 degrees tomorrow with the high in Edmonton with sunny skies and sunshine tomorrow, and Calgary with a high of -10. Now over in the rest of the prairie, seeing much colder temperatures, also wind chill factors in effect and risk of frostbite as well. -23 the high in Saskatoon, sunny skies, sunshine also reporting in Regina, -22 the high, and -23 the high in Winnipeg tomorrow. Now 3 degrees is what the expected high is tomorrow in Toronto with mainly cloudy skies. Looking at some flurries tomorrow in Ottawa, high of 3 degrees, -7 the high tomorrow in Montreal. Also looking at some snow there as well. -10 the high in Fredericton with 2 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow. Halifax looking at a high of -4, also expecting some flurries. Charlottetown expecting some flurries as well with a high of -9, and 0 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland, also seeing some snow along with wind factors, wind up to 60 kilometers per hour there. So there you have it. That is your forecasts.
Microsoft is purchasing gaming company Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion. Industry analysts say this will allow Microsoft to gain access to blockbuster games like Call of Duty and Candy Crush. The all-cash deal will let Microsoft accelerate mobile gaming and provide building blocks for the metaverse or a virtual environment. The announcement arrives with Activision still in turmoil over allegations of misconduct and unequal pay. The deal follows Microsoft's $7.5 billion acquisition last year of ZeniMax Media, the company behind popular video games such as Elder Scrolls, Doom, and Fallout. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the annual pace of housing starts fell 22% in December from the previous month, but activity remains quite high. The National Housing Agency says the seasonally adjusted rate of housing starts declined to 236,106 units last month due to a 24% drop in urban activity. CMHC says multiple unit urban starts, including apartments and condos, decreased by 29%, while single detached urban starts fell 4%. The 6-month moving average of seasonally adjusted annual rates of housing starts fell 2.6% last month over November. Suncor says it is committed to doing more to keep its workers safe following a fatal accident at its base mine site near Fort McMurray earlier this month. It says a contractor was killed when the heavy haul truck he was driving hit another truck when they were both driving up a mine haul ramp on January the 6th. Suncor is also reporting 2 other operational incidents in the last half of December that resulted in a production loss of around 195,000 barrels per day. Chief Executive Mark Little says all of the events are simply unacceptable. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 262 points on the day to 21,274. The Dow was down 543 points to 35,368. The S&P 500 was down 85 points to 4577, and the Nasdaq was down 386 on the day to 14,506. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $2.74 to $86.56 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $4.33 U.S. Gold was down 6 cents to $18.1369 U.S. an ounce. And silver was even at $23.47 U.S. an ounce. Wheat is at $12.11 per bushel. Barley's at $9.69. Canola's at $22.09. And corn is at $10.54 per bushel. Live cattle were down 30 cents to $137.68. Feeder cattle were down $1.25 to $161.45. And lean hogs were up 70 cents to $81.60. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at $79.91 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Justice Minister Casey Medew has been relieved of his duties over a call he made to Edmonton's police chief about a $300 distracted driving ticket. Premier Jason Kenney says he asked Medew to step aside while an independent investigator examines the facts of the case to determine whether Medew interfered in the administration of justice. Energy Minister Sonia Savage has assumed the duties as Solicitor General and Justice Minister for now. There's a convoy of truckers who are mobilizing and heading to Ottawa protesting the federal Liberals' vaccine mandate. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details for us in just a moment, along with more information on the new Pfizer pill that has been approved by Ottawa. Those stories and more are coming up.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Join the Helen Schuler Nature Center staff for a fun introduction to winter survival and test your skills through a series of team challenges. Taking place Saturday, February 5th from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., this workshop will teach you valuable skills that you can use on your next winter adventure. Cost is $10 per person and is open for those 16 and up. The workshop takes place outside, so come prepared and dress for the weather. For details and to sign up, visit leisure.lethbridge.ca. On Saturday, February 26th, Streets Alive Mission is hosting their Coldest Night of the Year fundraiser. This family-friendly walk is to raise money to help those who are experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness. To register, donate, and to find out more about this event and Streets Alive mission, visit cnoy.org/Lethbridge. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, an antiviral drug has been approved for use against COVID-19 by Health Canada. To discuss this in a little more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, is this a game changer for treating those in hospital who have COVID-19?
Yes and no. You know, as always, there's good news and there's bad news with so many stories, Hal. And so for the good news, yes, this will treat many people, but not all. The immediate bad news is there's worldwide demand for this. And so we're not going to have a huge supply. Will there be enough to help many people in the beginning? Yes. So the good news is this drug apparently works. It will help keep people who are in hospital from getting worse, from dying. That's all good news. Now, will everyone take it? I think some will, but so many of the people that I've heard from who are against the COVID-19 vaccines, they're not just against vaccines, they're against big pharma. So, you know, there's different groups of people who don't want to take the vaccine. There are some that want a more traditional vaccine. There are some who don't like the mRNA, and there are some who are against anything big pharma. So this drug comes from Pfizer. So if they've been railing against Pfizer for the past several months on why they won't take a vaccine, will they turn around and take an antiviral from the same drug company? There's a good chance that some of them won't. Many will, but some won't. And then the other group that this likely won't help is our deaths continue to be clustered around an older, vulnerable population. So who's dying from COVID-19, as it has been from the beginning? Elderly populations with multiple comorbidities. So if you're a 50 to 65-year-old who's in the hospital, maybe you got a couple of health issues, you catch COVID-19 and things go bad, this drug's probably going to help you. But if you're talking about your 85-year-old grandfather or father or mother, and they've got multiple underlying conditions, you know, that's been the most vulnerable group from the beginning. Even with this drug, they will remain the most vulnerable group. Vaccines have not protected them as well as we thought. A lot of protection, but this is still the most vulnerable group, regardless of what happens. So a lot of good and a lot of bad in this, all wrapped up in one.
You know, Brian, there are also groups across the country who are preaching about ivermectin, saying this is going to be the cure. You know, this is what you should really be using to treat. But because Big Pharma's not involved, there's no money to be made. That's why the feds are actually working with like Pfizer, Moderna, BioNTech, and so forth. What are you hearing?
People are putting forward different studies saying ivermectin works, ivermectin doesn't. I can tell you that the federal government has funded studies alongside the American government, alongside provincial governments, into ivermectin, into hydroxychloroquine, I can never say that properly, into so many of the drugs that people online say, this is the cure. And they have been found wanting, or maybe they have limited application, but it is not the cure-all. It is not the be-all and end-all. So there's a lot of different information. The idea that the federal government or Health Canada hasn't studied this, though, it's simply false. You can find the exact studies that they did and follow those links through to what the studies found on the federal government's website.
Brian, it appears as though Quebec is moving forward with its plans for an anti-vax tax. Now, this is something many people are claiming is illegal. In fact, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, I was chatting with its president, John Carpe, is suing the Quebec government over this plan. The feds are not saying anything in opposition to it, and a former premier thinks it will actually stand. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm hearing the federal government basically say Quebec is on the right path indirectly. That is what they're saying, because they're not challenging Quebec on this. Now, we still need the details. It's been more than a week since Francois Legault first talked about this, and we still don't know what the details are. But he did call it a health contribution for people who are unvaccinated. That, on the face of it, would violate the Canada Health Act, just for a start. It could also possibly violate Sections 2 and Section 7 of the Charter. But we need to see the details, and we haven't seen them yet. Now, there's been a claim that, well, Quebec saw a huge spike in the number of people getting their first doses. You know, they had one day where 7,000 people signed up. That was the huge spike, 7,000 people. Just the other day, last Friday, I believe it was, they did 4,000 first doses. Many of them were 5 to 11-year-olds, the children that have, been signing up because their parents are putting them forward for it. So there hasn't been a huge push for first doses in Quebec because of this. In next door in Ontario, they're doing 11,000 first doses a day, while Quebec's doing 4. That's well above, on a per capita basis, that's well above where Quebec is. So it's a false claim. But Jean Charest, the former premier of Quebec, says because this is popular, he thinks the federal government is going to allow it to go through. And I think Charest's right on that, even if I think the anti-vax tax is wrong.
Brian, let's talk about the Vax mandate for truckers. Now, truckers are not allowed to cross from the U.S. back into Canada across the border without being vaccinated. That's not sitting well with many truckers who are forming a convoy heading to Ottawa to voice their displeasure, and some truckers are also parking their rigs in support of the 10 to 15% of truckers who are not vaccinated. Brian, we thought we had supply chain issues before.
And this convoy won't help supply chain issues either, but the convoy also won't help their cause. Look, Canada brought in its vaccine mandate for truckers crossing the border on January 15th, so this past Saturday. On January 22nd, this coming Saturday, the American administration brings in their own. So, I've been speaking to people in the retail sector, in the manufacturing sector. Everybody's worried about it. Why? Prices are going to go up. It's going to hurt because we've got, as you said, about 10 to 15% of truckers. I would say it's about, nationally, it's about 84 to 85% of all truck drivers are fully vaccinated. They'll be able to continue crossing. But we've got about 120,000 Canadian truck drivers that cross the border on a regular basis, doing long haul routes to and from destinations in the United States. If you take 15% of that out, that's 18,000 drivers. We're already short 23,000 drivers, according to Stats Canada. So with that added on, 23,000 plus 18,000, we don't have enough drivers to look after what we've got in the system already. Prices are going to rise. Fruit going up as much as 25%, we're told. We're going to have part shortages. We're already seeing the effects in clothing, in large goods like furniture and appliances. All of this is just about to get worse.
Now, let's talk a bit about inflation. The federal Conservatives continue to speak up on the issue of inflation, Brian. The new housing numbers look very scary. A record jump again with the price of an average home over $713,000. I don't know how a young family can even afford 5% for a down payment. Rent has also gone through the roof, pardon the pun. Do the Liberals have a plan, or are they still saying this really isn't an issue?
They're trying to suck and blow at the same time, Hal, to tell you the truth. They're trying to have their cake and eat it. Whichever phrase you want to use, they're trying to say that they're doing things about cost of living while not. You remember a little while ago, they would only answer every question on the cost of living by talking about $10 a day childcare. Helps a very small number of people, even a small number of people with school age or childcare age children. So that was their talking point for a while. Now they say that they're moving forward on housing. But of course, if you look at their track record, they put a bunch of money in an envelope for the National Housing Strategy. Nothing came of it. Most of the money wasn't spent. It didn't build new housing stock, either for rental or for purchase. They've funded studies on taxing houses that they then deny that they're going to tax your primary residence, but it's an issue that keeps coming up. So no, the Liberals don't have a plan, and this is a real issue. And it's not just a Toronto and Vancouver issue. Those are the two primary areas, and in part because those are where the 400,000 immigrants that we bring in each year, that's where they settle. They settle in the regions around those two main cities. But people are also coming in from across other parts of the country to settle in other areas, and houses are going up. A suburb east of Toronto called Bowmanville, it's an hour-and-a-half drive from downtown Toronto, Hal. A house went from 760-odd thousand 18 months ago to $1.6 million. And there were no improvements done. And it's not a mansion. It's a standard suburban 3-bedroom type home. It's shocking that these things are going on. And the government's exacerbating the situation with cheap money rather than fixing it.
Brian, Canada's airlines and the biggest airport in our country, Pearson and Mississauga, they're asking Ottawa to drop PCR tests upon arrival for pass. Now, why is that? I thought this was important to help keep COVID out.
Well, it might have been helpful to keep COVID out in the early days of Omicron, but of course they had dropped testing. They had limited additional screening at first, and then they tried ramping up the testing. By the time they were ramping up the testing, of course, Omicron's everywhere. The cases are through the roof. It's milder, but we're having more people show up for testing. So there's a shortage of testing in every community across the country, whether it's in Alberta or next door in British Columbia, in Manitoba, in Ontario, in Quebec. There's a shortage of tests. Where is there no shortage of tests? Well, at the federal airports, where the federal government has finally ramped up to doing, not everyone, but a lot of people. Well, Omicron's already in the country, and the community spread is what you have to worry about. So the airlines are saying, look, this is an additional cost. People already have to have a test before they get on the plane to come into the country, 72 hours before. Now you're adding an additional cost with this. You're slowing everything down. Put the tests in the community. I've been a big advocate for testing and border measures for people coming in, Hal, so that we don't have restrictions put upon us in our daily lives. But when it's already in, and if they can't ramp up properly, maybe these folks have in the airlines and at Pearson Airport, maybe they have a point in that we're using the resources in the wrong spot when there's a worldwide shortage, just like there's a worldwide shortage of rapid tests going on right now.
I was reading recently that China is claiming that Omicron arrived by mail from Canada. That's kind of an odd claim. Tell me more about that.
It's a very odd claim, and the government is taking it seriously while also denouncing it as ludicrous. And I'm glad that they're taking that line. But my thought was the thought of many comments that I've seen and heard from people who said nobody believes that Omicron would arrive in China by Canada Post. It would arrive late. They wouldn't be getting it till April or sometime. I mean, the idea that this arrived by mail is just more propaganda from the dictators in Beijing who failed in the beginning of this pandemic to deal with it properly, lied to the world about it, and continue lying to the world. So I didn't believe them in January 2020. I don't believe them now.
Brian, Ottawa spent close to $12 billion on consultants last year. That's a lot of taxpayers' dollars going out the door. Now, isn't that what we have a highly paid federal civil service for?
Yeah, but we still decide that we've got to spend a lot more money on this. This has been an ongoing issue in the nation's capital. Back when, to take you all the way back to the mid-90s, when Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien slashed the federal budget, they laid off a lot of civil servants. It's one of the only times that house prices went down in the nation's capital because so many people were unemployed. Well, it turned around very quickly because they all became consultants and went back to work at their old departments. And so since then, people, different governments have tried to control the level of spending. When Stephen Harper and the Conservatives came in 2006, they had a couple of years of increase from $6 billion a year up to $8 billion. But then it stayed at $8 billion for about 7 years until the Trudeau Liberals came in. And it's gone from $8 billion to $12 billion over the last several years, even as the civil service has increased in size. So we've got more people working. Their salaries are well above what you get in the private sector or other levels of government. And when we're talking about the high level guys who commission these consultants and studies, they're getting paid $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Why are they not able and capable? If we're paying in that range, or even the mid-level managers well into the six figures, why are they not able to make those types of decisions without constantly turning around and saying, well, we need to hire consultants? I'll tell you why. It's called CYA, or cover your butt in polite language. They're making sure that if they make a bad decision, they can turn around and blame the consultant when things go wrong.
Brian, Canada has deployed special forces to Ukraine and offered financial aid for the country as well, as Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to flex his muscle and threaten Ukraine. Tell me more about that.
Well, we're on board with a bunch of allies on this, and I have to say I'm happy to see it, because when we heard from Melanie Joly, our foreign affairs minister, a little while ago, she sounded out of her league, out of her depths when talking about this, wouldn't commit to anything. Canada has been a long-standing ally of Ukraine. We have deep ties with Ukraine. This is something that I think Canadians expect of their government, but there was a hesitancy to say what we would do or how we would help them. So saying that we're sending special forces, we've deployed them already. We already have Canadian forces in Latvia. That's allegedly a training mission. Anyone that knows what they're talking about knows it's not really a training mission. We're protecting our friends in that region from Russian aggression. Russia says that they're worried about NATO expanding into Ukraine and that they don't want the alliance on their doorstep. Well, if they don't want the alliance on their doorstep, stop threatening Ukraine, stop threatening Latvia, stop threatening these countries that say, look, we're fine being neighbors, but we don't want to be under Moscow's thumb. The more they threaten these neighbors, the more they're going to find Western countries coming to their aid. And if Mr. Putin wants to de-escalate it, he knows how to do it.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Many would like to see revival take place in our Canadian cities and towns, but what would it take to see this actually happen? It doesn't just happen all by itself. Well, joining me to discuss this is Dr. Daniel Zapula. He is the pastor of Mid City Church in Lethbridge and the founder of Bridges of Hope Ministry, which is a humanitarian organization that empowers those in need around the globe. Quite a worthy cause, I would say. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Zapula. It's great to have you back on again.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back and to join you in this conversation.
Awesome. So what do you think it would take to see a city transformed? Some people say it can't be done without an ongoing prayer movement that prepares the way. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it begins with a city. Notice the sense of a city church. It begins with a community, a neighborhood of people that gathers together. Revival doesn't happen until people begin realizing that they are a community in the first place. And if you were to think about the early church and some of the things that took place, is that when people were gathered in one accord and that they were together. You see, God had decided that revival will never manifest outside of our connection. You see, it's when we are connected with God and connected to one another, it's in that connection, in those connections, that we see the incredible manifestation of God's grace.
That's amazing. So any idea as to where Lethbridge is at when it comes to this connection or to prayer, so to speak?
Yes, and I think it's quite important that we just say that revival happened in the midst of a connection, when people are recognizing themselves as one, with one accord, one heart. And I said in the early church, we work together. Now, in the city of Lethbridge, I think we have we're coming through a pandemic, and something that is quite important that, at least for my generation, this is it's like equivalent to what other people experienced during the First World War or the Second World War. And there's quite a lot of things happening. And I think from my point of view, I see that as a city, we have gone through a lot of a division. People are divided, people are fractured, and so community are so just divided in a sense. But from my point of view, as I look at our city, I look at the dynamic that it's going through, I think actually we are coming good together. It's like the first hit really, it just split us. And now we are coming back together as one. And I actually am saying that in the next couple of years, you're going to see some incredible move happening in this city, at least from my standpoint, what I'm witnessing and the kind of activity I'm taking part of. Revival is really here at our door. This, I think, in my lifetime, at least in this city, I have never seen, and I don't think I will ever see, a greater opportunity than this moment and this time. And that's why I said yes to taking part in this conversation.
Oh, that's amazing. So where do you think that we're headed over the next... So basically, you think that we're in better shape now than we were before, like, say, 10 years ago in that aspect?
Well, yes, because I think so. because this experience of going through this pandemic brought us together. It made us realize that we actually need one another, that I need you, you need me, and we are brothers and sisters. And it is in that environment that I believe God will move. 10 years ago, we are all complacent, building our own homes, building our own communities, building our own institutions. Now we are beginning to question what we have been building. Now we are wondering, are we building God's house, a glorious church without spot or wrinkle? And that question mattered more than the answer. And so right now, I am part of a group. I'm sitting on the board of the Lethbridge House of Prayer. Jennifer Thomas and her team, they are doing an incredible job. They're pulling people from all backgrounds together. And there's more prayer. We have, like, ladies and gentlemen participating in prayer, prayer evenings. And we have people with burdens coming and seeking the Lord's help. And it's more and more people are realizing that the answer is not in our technologies, it's not in our science, it's not in our abilities or disabilities, that the answer is actually in the Lord visiting a church and a community. And that's what revival really is. It's not the community trying to make something happen. It's not, that's religion. Revival is about God touching and coming upon a community, people who otherwise would have felt that they are nothing, I'm nobody, and God's presence upon them, redefining them and rewriting the mandate of their lives and telling them, you are a somebody because I have touched you, I have ministered to you, and I am just so excited, and I'm anticipating a visitation of God, His power and His Holy Spirit in our lives, like in ways we have never seen before. Here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more people give their lives to the Lord. I'm seeing more people joining and gathering together in homes. That's really, really good. It's no longer about institutions. This is about people who genuinely just want to connect with one another. When I want to connect, I want to be with you, you want to be with me, and in the presence of 2 and 3, guess what? There is something powerful. When 2 or 3 are gathered, He said, I am there. And that is what is exciting me in this city.
Yeah, it's really cool that you say that, because we're talking about pandemic, and pandemic it's caused so much division, like you said, but then you're also saying that this was a time that you're seeing a revival like no time before. So it's almost like in dark times, that's when God's Spirit really shows up. So where do you think things will go in the next decade, though? Do you see it going up again, or is it kind of a it goes up and down in waves?
That's such a great question. You know what? When I look at where we are now, I say, if you are a reader of history, you go back to the 3rd century. What we are witnessing, what we are going through is exactly the same things that they have been through. That this was a century before the creation of the Apostle Creed. You see, it is really moments like the 3rd century set the church up to define itself. And I just believe that this decade is a decade of redefinition, of us reaffirming who we truly are. And not only that, it's a decade for us to see God do so much in our life, because we have done too much for God. And I think we now want to see God do for us. Sometimes we are so obsessed and drunk with that and delirious with that desire. I got to do more for God. I got to do this for God. And so much that we forgot about experiencing God, who is there with us, walking with us. And God is saying, see what you can do. Hey, it's not much, but look at what I can do with one person devoted. And that is what I'm seeing, that the presence of God and the way God will move in the life of people. It's not the end of the church. In fact, the church is it's a glorious church without spot or wrinkle. It's not what you can see. The church is bigger, it's growing, and that's what I'm so excited about. I'm telling you, this decade, you're going to see the unveiling of God's plan for this this city, this nation. People said to me, this, like, we are, like, what happened? We are losing our liberty. I'm telling you the truth. God's prophetic destiny over our nation, over our people, over the church, the nation called church, God's prophetic destiny is manifesting. The kingdom of God is advancing. And that's the mystery of it. And I am so excited. I'm glad I'm alive, to witness this. And I hope that your listeners really can also feel the sense of excitement in the air. I'm just a bushman in this place, and I can see it. I can see it. And I pray, my prayer for people is that you awaken to that reality.
Mm-hmm. Now, you'd mentioned the church and what it's becoming. So, I mean, right now it seems like the church typically is no longer that main hub that people go to get their needs met or to go to for fellowship. We're particularly seeing this in some Canadian cities. But do you think that there's an expectation that the government is there to supply our needs, especially during, like we were talking about, the pandemic, during these kind of heavy times? What do you think about that?
Wow, that's a very, very incredible question. Thank you for asking that. The sense that, yes, there is a thought that the church was the hub. But actually, before the pandemic, the church was not the hub. And I think here the thing is we are mistaken sometimes to think that the church or our church is the center of activity. I'm telling you, the city is moving on. Like the church of God, the church has moved in the street. It's just the time for the institution to catch up to where church is going. In the street, in the highways and the byway, in mission fields, in and around the world, in our neighborhood. You see, because God is in the neighborhood. God is knocking at the heart of people. Church, like, is where 2 or 3 are gathered. It's in your family. It's in your home. It's in your heart. It is, I'm a sanctuary. Like, I'm a sanctuary. That's where God, a tabernacle, a place where God lives in me. So I think for us, for many of us, it's just a cultural change. We just need to have that change. Around the world, in China, in the places where revival is breaking, they don't have any like big building where they go and gather. No, in Burkina Faso, in some of the neighborhood, like they are being attacked by jihadists, and the church is growing. It's incredibly advancing. And you know what? They're not gathering around building beautifully lush building of red carpet and people coming there and lifting their hand up. No, people are out there in the bush and they're encountering God, his angel, his power. Revival have hit the street. And that's what I'm saying. It's just about time for the church to really get out and be the church, because God is not coming. Jesus is not coming for a defeated church, for a shamed church. He's coming for a victorious church, a church without spot, without wrinkle. And I'm so glad to be a leader in this church, looking at Jesus, who is a shepherd of us all. So I'm excited. My sister, what a great question. Right now, temporarily, for our physical need, it seemed like, wow, we need the government to hold our hand. We have realized the government brought a few dollars and there's no money anymore. I don't particularly think that people are really necessarily looking really more and more to government for their solution. You know what's happening? As a result of a business, of revival, is that people are starting new business. Whenever revival hit, churches grow, business thrive, people are taking initiative locally and continentally, transcontinentally. You see, whenever revival hit, people are using business as a mission. People are creative. There's the ingenuity in us that is like that alive. Something just flip, just on again. We are back online. Business, is so good. New businesses are starting. People are creating new things. And that's what I'm telling you. If the listener can pay attention to what's going on, the government will not save us. It's that anybody who believes the solution is in government is deceived, and you need a wake-up call, and you need to come, just I was going to say you need to go to church. No, or you need to come to Jesus. But the truth of the matter is that the solution is not in government. Ask the government, they will tell you the solution is not in government. The solution is each one of us waking up and being the church and becoming the church and living that. Like right now, I'm living by faith. I'm trusting the Lord for provision, for miraculous provision. I'm trusting God for a visitation. You know, marriages are breaking down. I know that. But you know what? It's just, I believe that the power of the Holy Spirit will visit us. This time, like marriage didn't break down because of a pandemic. We were broken down before. Now the pandemic just made us realize what we had. You know, it came to the surface, and now we can see it. Now, I wrote a book on marriage because I truly believe God will restore marriages and families. You know, churches are being rebuilt, communities rebuilt, leadership is getting in place. Oh, my sister, you getting me excited. Don't get me preaching.
I was just going to say, I can see that the revival is building up in you. You're on fire. Your energy is contagious, Daniel. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're almost out of time, but we appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for this moment, and we'll see you again.
Dr. Daniel Zopula is the pastor of Mitz City Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.